Hello and welcome to another video on the intermediate React version 5. This has been a series of course recorded by Brian Hall. Shout out to Brian Hall, this software engineering that has previously worked at Netflix, Reddit, Microsoft, and now he's currently the PM of Snowflake, this database as a service provider, where the whole point of this course is to see how you can write production ready React applications. Why is that? Because this is something that is in demand in a lot of company out there. Even though there are companies that are using Vue, but now they're heavily relying on React because this is where the vast market has. This is where they can find a pool of talent. So the idea of a recap this series of video is first to understand what are these things that we're gonna learn, especially for any time you watch a particular course. What are the techniques and strategies that I'm gonna learn from this, and then how can I apply that? So that's what we're gonna learn here. These techniques and tools that allow us to write these production ready React applications, tools like TypeScript, Tailwind, and Redux, and these advanced techniques such as code splitting, uh, server-side rendering, testing, and transition. So first things first, we look at hooks in depth. This course or this series of course where Brian Holt before he taught a lot of the hooks that React put on their docs. Now he realized that the vast majority of them you rarely are gonna use it. Not to mention that you're ever gonna use it. So even though the idea here is to look at what are the most relevant or what are those that Brian Hall meant things that you're gonna see that along the way, and then describe what are the main use cases. So first we look with the use ref. Pretty straightforward. This is like you're having a sticker notes when you put that in different things in your room, okay, or even in your kitchen. You put this different sticker note that contains some information about it. Now, technically speaking, this sticker notes, this reference is something that you put at any of the DOM elements as a way to hold a reference so you can let it on access to them, or to hold a reference on JavaScript so you can let it on access to it. So for example, when you want to write a counter or a stopwatch, okay, so that's very interesting. Then we look at use reducer, how you can use reducer as a way to say, because we want to have a way of keep track and test whenever a state change. We if you use context, there is actually no way of doing that. So this is this kind of indirection. So with reducer, which is something that it was popularized by Redux, this data management or state management pattern, one way data flow. They say, hey, this reducers is just a it's just a fancy way of saying I got this function that I pass is a state and an action to generate a bit of new state. That's the whole point of this. So then here we look at how can we do that. For example, as a way that what happening anytime a particular state change. And in your reducer is where you define this switch case when you're going to generate is this new bit of data. using the object.assign. And in there, we look at why we use object.assign. After all, this is the way how you can create is a new object that contain own properties and all additional property that you want to add from the target to different sources. And the idea here is that follow is the functional programming, especially when you want to write your functions that are testable and debuggable as a way to know, hey, what's going on here? What happened when you change the state? Okay, when I pass this action, what happened here? When I pass another action, what happened here? When I click here, what happened here? You know, you have this certainty and predictability of what's going on. You also can do something called time travel as a way to see is the data flow across time or this time series data. That's interesting. But yeah, this is use reducer. Then I also look at use callback and use memo. This is optimization techniques when you want to run or when you want to render components once. You know, when you want to run components only once. So the idea is that once you're able to, for example, have several components in that React component that are actually rendering, okay? So whenever an state change, you actually re-rendering all of that components. So the idea is by, for example, React components. So the idea here is say, hey, I just want to render is only this component once, whether it's using callback or memo, okay? uh, you have to evaluate when you can use it and for how long, and if that actually is what you want. Okay, have a problem before solve a problem. So then I also look at another custom hooks, which is the use ID and use ID and what's the other? Use ID and use layout. Okay, so the sort of difference is that use ID is when you want to uniquely identify elements uh, for forms. Okay, that's what they use for. So you don't use ID, even though don't use ID for loops. Don't ever do that. Even though they don't they discourage you to use that from the docs, and that's right. So the other is the use layout. Why do we need use layout? This behaves somewhat similar to use effect. In what sense? Use effect, after all, what it does is to anytime a it will trigger after the renders end, but immediately after. So the thing here is that it won't wait for it won't wait for the React function to be completed. When the React calls the render function, that's what it's going to do. It's going to then immediately trigger is whatever you pass in the callback when you're using use effect. So because there is no wait time, you might have sometimes is a quirk layout on that. So the solution to this, okay, as a way to say, hey, I would like you to wait for the next tick, I would like you to wait for the request animation frame, is to say, okay, this callback or this hook, use layout will now wait for the render function to fully end, or for when that element paints that, and now is when you're gonna trigger that. So when you want to use this, anytime you need to actually check for a layout, or for example, if you want to build this a text box, and you want to resize that element, and you want to know what is the size of that, well, by using is use layout, you can now get that. So after any time the user is, for example, resizing that, so after the resize happen, then you're going to see the data in there. So the idea here is that even the name suggests use layout, okay, is that when the render ends in paint on the screen, that's when this function will be called. That's interesting. That's interesting. And that's also another subtle different distinction. So you can use effects and use layout. Again, use carefully, use sparingly, use layout. Please do use layout. Use layout effect. Okay. Use it sparingly, because this can impact the performance of that. So exactly. So use layout effect is that. So use layout effect is a version of the use effect, but this fires before the browser repaints the screen, which means that it will wait for the next tick. So after the re-render function has been called and renders that, now it is time to do. So it will call now before it re-renders, before it paints or repaints on the screen. Again, you have to be careful when you want to use it. Okay, measuring layout before the browser repaint the screen. That's one of the use cases. Okay, uh, so that's one of the use case here. For example, for this small element here, what you want to know is the measuring of the layout before the browser repaints. Again, remember that each one of these particularly custom hooks or hooks in depth are very narrow specific to Facebook, to solve Facebook problems. Not all of us has Facebook problems. So after that, okay, then I look at now the tools called Tailwinds. What is Tailwinds, and why, for example, unlike other things like materials UI or Bootstrap. So when you build a Bootstrap website, they will look like, or when you build something using Bootstrap, they will look like something built on that tool, whether it's Bootstrap or Material UI. So this is something great. This is valid for internal app. Okay, very very valid for internal apps. hmm but when you need, for example, for example, for landing page, or for any public landing or page, sorry, for any public or landing page, uh, this might not be one way to do that, right? So this Tailwinds instead it provides you a way to write your CSS, and the compiler of CSS will make this application for us. Will make this application for us, writing out or outputting a very minimalistic CSS. So this is very interesting. Totally, totally. Why is that? Because unlike other tools for using CSS in JavaScript, such as style components, CSS model, which is something that I'm a big fan of that, you actually have really true CSS code. You got a motion. Uh, the idea with Tailwinds is that it will provide you a set of classes that, yes, it will make your code verbose, but you only have to rely on that. You can write your own CSS if you want, but the idea here is to rely on this. So that's a subtle difference between any UI design, whether it is the Bootstrap, Material UI, Element UI, whatever. All right. So once you build something with that, it will look like that. Great for internal use apps. Okay. So here we're gonna see is Tailwind because this is something that the React community has now embraced, and I see the potential of that because now you don't have to write your own queries. You can rely on the default value that comes with Tailwind. We also look at how you can now improve and uh, fit the Tailwinds fit Tailwinds with the Adopt Pet app or project app, and then how we can uh, how to install is Tailwind. First, by using is the specific version. In our case, we rely is on this very high lock package JSON to make sure that this project will work on this particular version, no matter how many time has passed, years, decades. The idea here is that as long as Node still being used, you can rely on all of this. All right. So we install here is Tailwind, something called Post CSS, which is great. I'm going to explain that, and Auto Prefixer. So Tailwind is this compiler CSS, okay, uh, that allow you to now use all of these uh, utility class CSS and the Post CSS, which is like the Babel of CSS. So is this transpiler? So post CSS is pass your CSS through a parser and then through several plugins that come with or you can add on to post CSS, such as auto prefixer. And auto prefixers make your CSS make modern CSS works on every browser. Cool. And that's the beauty of using is post CSS with a Tailwind. Totally. Okay. Then we look at what we have to do, especially to install our Tailwind package, which is running the npm init Tailwind, and then it will generate for us is the two files, the post CSS, this transpiler, this Babel for CSS, okay, and the Tailwind configuration. Something that actually take me a little bit of time to configure, which is prettier, okay, as a way that my VS Code detect that, and it was mainly a human error because I have different workplace working on, and didn't set the configurations for that properly. It took me a while to figuring out, oh, this is what's going on. But after that, uh, I could finally, now is add tailwind successfully and starting to see how you end at the prettier plugin, okay, that allow us to this auto formatting, which is very very interesting, very interesting, very interesting. Interesting. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because sometimes I have issues with that. I have issues is with breeder, man. Jesus. I always have some issue here with breeder. This formatter. Anyway, anyway, anyway. So yeah, this is something to know about breeder when you're using breeder. Most likely because they have different. Uh, Let me actually, in fact, show you what I'm doing here. Here, because these plugins, because now the entire ecosystem moved from EXS to CommonJS, or from CommonJS to EXS. There's a lot of package out there that they are not compatible, and they're gonna throw you errors from this, and then you have to do some quirks or hard code things. But yeah, it's like wiring little cables here as a way to everything works as expected. Yep. So even though the idea of using now is tailwinds is for first look at the underlying technology that is using, as well as what are the goal of using tailwinds. And once, for example, once we take a look at this at the app, what we're starting to adding is all of this little class here, as you can see, to, okay, now it works. It works as expected. That's interesting. It didn't break that. Okay, now you break it. Interesting. So, so for example, if I take a look at this and put this padding here, and I save, they will reorganize that in their ordering of precedence. That's one of the beautiful things of using Preview. It's like, oh, now it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so next, after I look at this nice little thing that we can do, we also improve the look and feel of, uh, yeah, I also improve the look and feel of uh, applications like the pet section here, uh, pet result, okay, and search pattern here, as well as, yeah, pretty much that. Okay, so once I look at, no, the disable, we didn't touch disable details, sorry. So once we were able, what we can do here with this tailwind, okay, and how tailwind is this utility class base CSS, which has shown that using this approach improve the readability, maintainability of code base rather than having large CSS code base, okay, which is something that when you have this, the previous version, it is something that is quite, uh, as you can see, if someone actually touch this code or if there are many people touching this code base, it is a mess. It can quickly run into conflicts and you don't want that. So that's the idea of using now this utility class based CSS, okay? Because it's way much more easy to maintain HTML than CSS. All right. So yeah. So then after I look at that, I saw how can we, okay, how we can styling our components. Then how we can provide, yeah, how we can styling our components. Oh my God, why you're not showing that? Okay, good. How you can style in your component, how you can add particularly plugins to your component. So, for example, and how you can start first. What is Tailwind? Okay, which is this utility class base that makes maintaining your CSS code base much more easy rather than having a large CSS code base, because maintaining HTML element is much more easier than large CSS code base. And for example, uh, when you need to write internal apps where the look and feel doesn't matter too much, as long as they are usable and nice, that's what we have this the design system, material, bootstrap. Okay, so once you build a website on bootstrap, you know that that website was built on that. Okay. But now here, when you want to build applications or when you want to build custom UI systems, okay, uh, this will make your life much more easier. You can build UI on top of that, which is something that you can find under docs. But the idea here is that Tailwind is just a methodology of how you can write your CSS. Okay, then we look at how can we install that by adding is the package JSON as well as the Tailwind and post CSS, and then on the style add this particularly rules, whether it's the base, the components, and utility. So make yourself familiar of how you can now add this uh, set of CSS class that comes behind the scenes. So base, components, and utility, they have this order of precedence. So the base is for anything that is related to reset to a default state, to add this preset, so to make your browser look and look to a particular way, reset it. Okay. Then you have the components. This is pretty much like, hey, where is it? What will be is the style of the text or the padding that it needs for certain components, certain inputs. And then you have the utility. Hey, is this active? Is this what we're gonna do when this is active, or when this is hover? And they have this order of precedence. So when you mutate, or when you so utility override components, and components override base, and that's the order here. So then I look at how, for example, especially on forms, and that's something that is very, very tedious, and something that a lot of people and company actually are looking for, that you are able to create forms, okay, and yeah, that you're able to create forms, and how by that, okay, in our component called details, I think it is, no, search patterns here, in this component called like this, well, we add here is some style here for our forms and for our labels here. And as you can see, we add something called search inputs and some Tailwind CSS class, because there is a little nice package or plugin that we can use in Tailwind as a way to format forms. Okay, that's what we did here in the plugin. Say, I want you to now import this nice little preset of form. Okay, and after that, after we know how we can add styles to our plug, how can we add plugins to Tailwinds, then we look at something called layers in Tailwinds. So layers is pretty much like saying, hey, once I define this, I want inside of the component of your utility, okay, remember that, as you can see, utility override components, or components override base, okay. This is when you say, hey, okay, I would like now to have is a component or a search input that you can now reuse the Tailwind class base by using is the apply. This is something interesting. This is something very, very powerful here by adding this layer, which is something that we use on the search pattern, as you can see here. So this is if you want to use a CSS for your case, and if you're gonna use that, do the way Tailwind promotes. Okay, I know that you feel the temptation to write your own query, but that's then defeat the whole purpose of using Tailwind. It's like, don't use Tailwind, write your own CSS style. So okay, that's again, this is something that it works for React components. Okay, this particular approach I see is something useful for React components, uh, and I get it why some people actually prefers to use CSS model, because now you can encapsulate is the logic inside of your component. Okay. Let me actually show that. There you got it. CSS models. Okay, CSS models. Okay. A CSS model is a CSS file where all class names and animations name are scoped locally by default. That's one of the beautiful things of this. Is like, unlike this is now go for view, what you can use is a scope, and the inner mechanism that they use for scope style. But with CSS model, now you can make sure that you have truly scope CSS. All URLs like this and imports are in model requests with this means relative to that. So uh, in the case, so in the case of this, so when importing a CSS model from a JavaScript model, it exports an object with all mappings from local names to global names. Style.className, and that's what you can use for that. That's something interesting, by the way. This is how you can compose this class name, style.className, and that kind of thing. So very interesting CSS models, and so they don't have any documentation about CSS models. That's pretty interesting. That's all. Get started on examples. Okay, exactly how you can use with all of these other preprocessors or tools here. Right now we're using Expose CSS. We can also use with Vite, which is great. Aerospack, Webpack, that's right. Frameworks that you can use, even with Nox, Remix, Solid, Svelte, blah blah blah. And there you go. Okay. So setting up CSS model. Yep. Cool. Cool. Let me take a look at the Post CSS examples of how you can use this. Uh, this is an example of this. Exactly. After the transformation, it becomes like this. So the idea of that is that behind the scenes, these models, as a way to guarantee that you're going to, so as a way to guarantee uniqueness, okay, they're generating is a hash for your style, which means that uh, this is a nice little trick that they're doing behind the scenes, especially when using the post CSS models with CSS models, okay, and not only at the client side, is that now it actually generating is this unique identifiers or these unique selectors, where you of course will have a truly uh, scope CSS. So that's an interesting way of how you can use now CSS, right? And how you can bind that style to a particularly class name or a particularly React component. So that's very, very interesting. Again, this is a one way to do that. Okay. If you don't want to use CSS models, you can use this emotion for that. But again, the whole point of using Tailwind rather than CSS model and other technology out there is that utility first class CSS is an approach that has shown that it's much more easy to maintain, extend, because it is way much more easy to maintain HTML elements rather than large CSS code bases. That's what happens. And then you have all of this conflict that might happen, and perhaps someone decide to bang a an important in some style. So now you're doomed. So anyway, anyway, that's the reason why we can use is CSS models or tailwinds as a way to give style to this. And that's also the value proposition when you have to show off that to your PM or your PO, you name it. So it's like that. It's like, oh, okay, now this starting to make a lot of sense. So if we can use these particular tools, utility based, in theory and in practice, it will make the life of developers, including myself, much more easy, especially when you want to now have a particular way of have a methodology for writing CSS. Okay, okay, good. Now the next step here is to see how you can now creating layouts here, which is one of the very cool thing of using Tailwinds, is that because it comes with this utility first, or these utilities. Now when it comes to actually create our own layouts, it'll it is just straightforward for that. In the case of the search pattern here, where we add is the flex column here, is here. No, I mean is on detail. Detail was the section. No detail. Result exactly. So when you want to display elements, you want to show off a list of elements. How this element you want to look like? Okay. So here we can easily use is the grid. So right now I don't need to actually deep dive in grid. If I do that, well, that actually is something that will take me 5 minutes to set up, 5 to 10 minutes to set up. Okay. Uh, but here it was just straightforward to actually use this, as long as you understand that, of course. So it'll makes a lot of sense for using this, right? And the other cool part of this is not only to define is what is the grid by default, but also is the breakpoints. That's where my mind blows, and that's where the fun part came here. Is you cannot define a particular breakpoint and say, hey, given this breakpoint, now I want you to uh, create a grid with two columns. And if it's large, okay, giving a particular width, is that okay? Now I want you to make this three columns. If you don't, if you don't trust what I say, which is exactly what I will expect from you, after I run this and open in the browser. So go now to the browser. So we have here the adopt me, and as you can see, we got is this three columns on large, okay, three columns, three columns on large. Oh my god, three column on large, okay, and all right, and once our layout is smaller, it collapses too. If it is even smaller, it collapses well. All of this is something that is so the browser is doing a lot of heavy work for us. Completely, man. Completely. The browser is doing a lot of heavy work from that. Totally. Totally. So that's also interesting. We also add some CSS class here for particularly layouts as a way to say, hey, I would like to now add, for example, in the search input, uh, a particular style for this, and I want you to disable this on the utility. So we add this CSS class on the utility, and we add now on the component is to give this dimension here. So that was all for tailwinds. I am quite familiar with this. The hard part maybe is how you set up with Prettier as a way to work as expected. One, you need to recognize this broken change or breaking chains from CommonJS and EX6. Okay, if your applications rely heavily on Webpack forms, that's not a good candidate for actually mega migration. Move on to EX6, right? It's like, no, no. It's like, no, no, definitely no. It's like, definitely no. That's a no, no. Um, because you need to actually update all of your dependency manually. You have to do all of that manual dependency, and things can break along the way. Anyway, so yeah, so that was all for tailwinds, right? That was all for tailwinds. And right now, here, another important things to know and to describe is that switching context is destroying your productivity. Why we have this? Because when you are working in a particular thing, for example, React, okay, and then you're using Tailwinds, and then you decide to write your own CSS class, it's like when you switch to another context to work it, that will kill your productivity. That is destroying your productivity. Something, this is a quote from Brian Holt. Brian Holt. So do not, I know that sometimes we can feel the temptations of impulsively switch context because there is sometimes there's a heavy load cognitive task, or it's a heavy cognitive task load that we have. So it's better to split this in small chunk of all of that, focus on that, and then you can move on to the next topic. Uh, so okay, all right, which is divide and conquer, an approach that is being heavily used in searching and sorting algorithms, especially in sorting. Okay, good, 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 good. Now, okay, it is time to take a look at the next topic, which is advanced React performance. Okay, advanced React performance. So at at advanced React performance. You got it. There you go. Okay, okay, here we are. Code splitting. Code splitting. All right.
We are going to move on to code splitting.
So we are going. So we are going to move on to code splitting. You're not gonna see what I'm doing, especially because right now I am recording. Right now I'm looking at the Brian Hall course and how from there. Okay. Whew, thanks. We're gonna. So right now I'm looking is at the Brian Hall course, the code splitting video in because I already received a strike from one of their legal firms for digital asset protections, which is someone in the Air Force that sent me a DM in LinkedIn and said me, hey, you know what? Agree again. Good that you are recording yourself to learn all of that kind of thing, but uh, you're far exceeding the fair use. So you should not is record yourself while learning here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, totally. So we're moving now to, or we're going to move on to code splitting.
or more specifically, advanced React performance.
A more specific React performance.
We're going to do two different things. We're going to do code splitting, and then we're going to do server-side rendering together, which is kind of exciting for me because I used to have to do these sections separately.
Okay. We have, so we have to do code, code splitting first, and then server side, server side rendering. This is an exciting things for Brian Hall. Okay, this is an exciting thing from Brian Hall. Uh, because he used to do that separately. Okay.
Because code splitting and server-side rendering used to not play together very
Okay. Because okay, because code splitting, code splitting and server side rendering are used to not play very well together. I wonder why.
well. Finally, with React 18, they made them play well together.
Okay. Finally, with React 18, they make they made or they made they make them play well together, like little kids,
Very happy about.
which he's very happy about, which he's very happy about. I wonder why. Here we go. The rabbit hole.
So, if you're like me and you were working on a copy of context, you can just go ahead and dump that. And I am going to grab another copy of, let's see, I'll just do it this way. Copy. Okay, call this current again. I'm gonna have to stop this, and then I'm gonna just reinstall my node modules again. So, code splitting. React by itself is about
Okay. Okay. Interesting. It's like he ditched that. Okay. Okay, he ditched that. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. He basically ditched that. Okay. Code splitting. He basically ditched that. It's like, okay, here we are. So okay. Oh my god. See the code splitting. Open up here. That's right. You got it. And open the code splitting. So what I'm doing right now is, come on, take a look at this. Open here. Come on, for real. Doo-doo-doo. Now because we are in this. Okay. What about now? You got it. I don't want to open. Okay, this is one of my. I'm not gonna do that here. I'm definitely not gonna do that here. Okay, not right now. Okay. There we got it. Pa, 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 pa. All right. So we're gonna do is an npm install. There you got it. That's good. All right. And I think that'll be all for our case. We have is the sort here. What we have is the interesting. So now we change that a little bit. Okay, go back to the browser. There you go.
40-ish kilobytes.
So Brian Hall mentioned that React is okay. By itself React by itself is about 40 kilobytes. Damn, son, really? React size. Oh, height and width. React size of yeah. Just minify. Mm. Oh, let me take a look at this. How can I look at that? Because it was 5 years ago. You can see it here in React 16 block. Reduce file size. Webpack bundle analyzer. Exactly. The Webpack bundle analyzer here. Analyze separately, as you can see here. Webpack visualizer, or you can use the 3-map visualizer. Okay, that's great. Bundle phobia. This was something more recently, like 6 years ago. Interesting. Okay. Bundle phobia. Alright. What if you don't say this is a very interesting website. Bundle phobia. Okay. Bundle phobia. Dev tools, bro. Come here to my little nice at the collection. Uh, Bundle analyzer. Okay. Yep. So, minify, and this is now previous version, 16 and all of that. But what if I don't want to know is the minify version? You know, Hmm. But this is minify. Exactly. Ah, what about React router or React router, React React DOM, man? Because this is so the developer surface of React is actually very lightweight, right? But the React DOM, the one who actually is that communicated to the DOM, mm-hmm, holy moly, holy moly, it's actually 130 kilobytes or 40K 2 kilobytes minifying GZIP. Damn, that's a lot. That's a lot. So React by itself, React DOM, you have to be more explicit. So React DOM version 18 by itself is about 40 kilo. It's about uh, 42 kilobytes. Okay, and React, the developer surface version 18. Okay, now that actually weighs uh, React. Now that actually weighs 2.5 kilobytes. Mm-hmm. 2.5 kilobytes. Exactly. Kilobytes. You must put that here. Kilobytes. So making roughly in total, making roughly React about 40 kilobytes, 45 kilobytes. Minimize ng-zip. Minified ng-zip. Okay? Holy moly. Holy moly. Bundle phobia. Okay. That's very, very interesting. Even it tells you the download time for that. So, for example, if you want to use other libraries like Vue, for example, 40 kilobytes. Another example is Angular, of course. Angular 1, no, but Angular. Mm, Another example is, for example, if you bootstrap, okay, great. Noise, noise, by the way. Um, Storybook, resolving version and dependency bundling pack. Hmm. Okay. Story block. Bad gateway. What the flying fucking hell? Oh, okay. What the flying fuck? Did you collapse? Story block? Hmm. Hosted on the Little Ocean. Recent search and design. Pandas, yes. Oh my god. Anyway. Okay. No problem. No problem. No problem. No problem. Anyway. So, yeah.
And if we go in here, I think I have a link to that. I do.
Bottle
42
foggy.
kilobytes to get React DOM, and then React is about itself 2.5 kilobytes. So altogether, just under 45 kilobytes. If you are trying to keep your performance budget under 100 kilobytes for that initial page load, you probably need to do code splitting.
Exactly. Um, yeah, making roughly React about less than 40, yeah, less than 40 kilobytes minifying zips. If you want, if you want to make your initial load 100 kilobyte, then you need to do code splitting, of course.
So code splitting is the idea that you just load the bare minimum necessary code to get your app up and running so the user sees some.
Okay, so code splitting is the idea, yeah. So code splitting is the idea that you bundle the the minimal code.
Probably need to do code splitting. So code splitting is the idea that you just load the bare minimum.
Okay, so code splitting is the idea that you load, you bundle, that you load the the minimum bare minimum minimum necessary code. Okay, necessary code.
Necessary code to get your app up and running so the user you probably need to do code splitting. So code splitting is the idea that you just load the bare minimum necessary code to get your app up and running so the user.
You load the bare minimum necessary code. Teach your app. Okay. You load the bare minimum code. Teach your app. Teach your app to get your app up and running. Okay. So the users see something immediately. So the users see so the user sees something immediately. Just this immediately. Yep, I did this. Okay.
See something immediately, and then you hurry in the background and you load everything up.
And then you hurry the background with everything else. That's the value proposition of code splitting. Okay, so the value proposition of code splitting, okay, so the value proposition of code splitting is if you want to make your app fast enough on the initial load, you load the bare minimum code to teach your app to get your app up and running so the user sees something immediately. Right? So the user sees something immediately, and in the background, uh, and then hurry the background with everything else. And then you hurry the background. And then you hurry the background. You hurry. And then you hurry the background. This particular combination of words is quite interesting. You hurry the background with everything else. That combination is astonishing, incredible, interesting. Holy moly. So, but this is the value proposition of code splitting. Is the idea to load the yeah the value proposition of code splitting is the idea to load the bare minimum necessary code, teach your app to get your app up and running, so the user sees something immediately. But that's the idea here is to immediately load something, or is to load the bare minimum. So load the bare minimum necessary code, teach your app to get teach your app to get up and running to so the user sees something wherever it is, okay, completely. Because if you think about it, so let's think about it. What happens when you have a huge well, even in bundle phobia you can see that bundle phobia bundle phobia here, right? So for example, you want to load Angular, right? No, this doesn't work. Okay, what about now? Oh my god. Uh-huh. It's like, hmm, what about Webpack? Oh my god. Anyway, okay, that doesn't want to work. Okay. Anyway, but imagine that your loading is your application, or your loading is an e-commerce, and is that e-commerce weighs about 1 megabyte? Okay, that will take forever. So the idea here is that you don't. So the idea with code splitting is to load the bare minimum necessary code to teach your app to get up and running so the user sees something, and while you hurry the background with everything else. And I love the way, even though that how Brian Hall described this thing, that to me is quite elegant, because this is also something true to me, or as a way to improve my English skills, my pronunciation, and my speaking, as a way to say, hey, look at the way how they're using, or he's using the language, and then you say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, especially when you are creating this storytelling. So that's the value proposition of code splitting. Okay, you load the bare minimum necessary code to teach your app to get everything up and running, so users can see something while hearing the background with everything else. How do you translate that in Spanish? La idea de separar el código es para que tú puedas cargar al inicio de la aplicación la mínima cantidad de código necesaria que le enseñe a tu aplicación a desplegarse y a mostrar algo al usuario mientras apresuras el el tras de escena con todo lo demás. Eso me parece muy importante describirlo, muy importante hablarlo, articularlo. Totally, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally. Oh my god. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you hurry the background with everything else. That's something powerful. Okay. Move on.
Yes. You need some sort of strategy to be able to split things out.
You need, of course, because it's like, okay, great. That you know that you need some sort of way to actually low bare minimum necessary code that teach your app to get up and running uh, so the users see something immediately and then you hurry the background with everything else. All right, how do you do this? What are the things that you need to do? What are the strategy or tactics that you need to do? What are the difference between a strategy, okay? Interesting, strategy is feminine. What? A detailed plan to achieve success in situations such as war, politics, business, industry, or sport, or the skill of planning for such situation. So strategy is a planning, a detailed plan for achieve something. Strategy. And the tactics, you know, a planned way of doing something. So the the first tell you is the map. The other is give you is the how. Okay. One can give you is meaning. Okay. One can give you is meaning. The other tells you how. That's one of the reasons why strategy and tactic is something that people that have, of course, a lot of time in their hands, they can dedicate time to now plan over these over the years, plan over the days, weeks, and years. Whereas people that have tactics, they know how to do things in this moment. So, well, the reason why I'm looking at this, people who have more time to face challenge, they usually are more strategic than people who don't have the time and their entire environments require them to do things particulars, right? To do things, to do tactics. That's what happened. And again, this is something that you earn. I don't think this is something that you can teach. That this is something that that the environment promotes you to do that. The environment must promote you to do this kind of thing. Yeah, completely, man. Totally, totally, completely, completely. Anyway, here we are. That's right. So you need a strategy to split that code. So you need some sort of a strategy. So you need some sort of a strategy to split that out.
Luckily for us, React and Vite work together really well.
Exactly. Okay. But what if you don't have that? Luckily for us, React and Vite works or plays really well to make that happen, that happen to you, or that happen for you. hmm That strategy, that plan of how you can split things out, your code.
Make that happen for you.
Okay.
By the way, I'm not implying that you have to have a code budget of 100 kilobytes, but you should have a size budget of something for your application. By the way, I'm not implying that you have to have a
hmm By the way, I'm not implying that you should have 100 kilobyte weight. I'm not implying that you have. I'm not implying that you that you must have, that you have to have, that you have to have a code budget for of 100 kilobyte, 100 kilobyte, but you do need a code budget.
code budget of 100 kilobytes, but you should have a size budget of something for your application.
But you do, but you should, but you should depend of which type of application are you building. For example, if marketing, of course, landing as well, inner back office as well. Perhaps the total length, perhaps the threshold is quite different in each one of them. The tolerance is also different. But again, you should have a code budget or something like that in your application.
Something they're trying to stay under, or some performance timing you're trying to hit. You should be
Something you might want, something you might want to keep.
your kilobytes, but you should have a size budget of something for your application. Something they're trying to stay under, or
Exactly. Something you try to stay under, or some performance.
some performance timing you're trying to hit.
Exactly. Something you try to stay under, something something you you try to stay under, or some performance timing you're trying to reach, you're trying to reach.
You should be thinking about what's a reasonable amount of time that it takes me for my app to load in front of my user.
You should be thinking what will be a reasonable reason reasonable time. Okay, you should be thinking what will be a reasonable exact you should be thinking what will be a reasonable reasonable times for users to wait.
Something they're trying to stay under, or some performance timing they're trying to hit. You should be thinking.
Is it some performance timing you're trying to hit? Because they don't use reach, they use hit. There's some also, it's important to recognize this particular jargon they're using here. Okay, trying to stay under. Try to stay under. Try to hit something. I love this. Mantenerte debajo de o llegar a algo. Exactly.
Thinking about what's a reasonable amount of time that it takes me for my app to load in front of my user.
So what is the so you should be thinking what will be a reasonable time for users.
Something they're trying to stay under, or some performance timing you're trying to hit. You should be thinking about what's a reasonable amount of time that it takes me.
Okay, what's a reasonable amount of time that it takes me
For my app to load in front of me.
for my app to load in front of the user. And when he do this, he's not putting himself in the position of the app. Okay, so okay, I am the app. So now thinking, so yeah, you should be thinking what will be a reasonable amount. Okay, so you should be thinking what will be a reasonable amount of time. Yeah, you should be thinking what will be the reasonable amount of time for me, or for my apps, for me as an app, for me to load in front of the users. This play of perspective is something interesting here. Yep. But what will be the reasonable? Anytime you're doing any of this, so you should have. Again, he's not enforcing having to 100 kilobytes, because this is something that he mentioned. Okay. Uh, Especially when you're talking about this code splitting, which is something that now in React 18, uh, thankfully, uh, which is something that he's excited for. React 18 now it does this code splitting and server side to play well together. So it seems that that was something that is not that easy to do that back in the old days. Okay, the when this course was published. Oh, I get it. This course was published in 2022. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And when React 18 was launched, React 18, React 18 published. Mm, And this course is from published in December 6th. Okay, that's interesting. React 18 is now available in our last post, March 29, 2022. Okay. As you can see here, there is a lot of company that is taking quite amount of time to keep up the pace. You know, there is a lot of applications out there that is taking a lot of time to keep up the pace. hmm So this was published in March 29, 2022. Okay? Okay. And they launched this course, okay, or they published this course in December 6th, so a couple months later, okay, so a couple months later, gradually adopting concurrency features. Suspense in data frameworks. Server components is still in development. Server components. What's new in React feature? Automatic batching. hmm New features transition. Which is a new feature transition. New feature automatic batching. New suspense features. New clients and server rendering app API. New client server rendering API. React DOM client. React DOM server. Render to pipeable stream. Render to readable stream. New street mode. Behaviors. New hooks. Use ID. Use transition. Use defer value. Use sync external store. Use insertion effect. And how to upgrade. So React DOM, React DOM server, React DOM test utils, React Fresh, server components. Okay, why am I looking at this? Because since this will be something fairly common, okay, in this ecosystem, and then you want to now provide this feature to any company out there, it's like, okay, so you will have to keep up the pace here. Okay, you will have to keep up the pace here. That's great. That's interesting. hmm Okay. So by looking now at these features, and perhaps what I'm gonna do after this is to build up my knowledge on the new from the new change, which is right now they're currently in version 19. Let me see if they actually launched that. React Concave here. But this is, but we are going backwards. Plan for React 18. Oh, we're going backward. What the fly? And React 19. Okay. What about their blog? React Labs, where we have working on February 2024. React Canary, React Labs, in March 2023 presentation, React 18. Exactly, they haven't launched that. React Labs, what we have working on. hmm React.dev. Okay, okay. So great, great. Okay. 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 All right. All right. All right. So why hit this? Why I'm slowing down here a little bit? It's because I was wants to find a way to where you can keep up the pace with all of these incoming trends. Mainly is by looking at their blogs. Okay. And there they're gonna keep up the pace of how they are actually doing the thing that they do. All right. That makes a lot of sense. Vastly. So here we're looking is now the code splitting, okay, and how this was something that didn't play well with server-side rendering. React 18 now make that happen. Great. The question is why they didn't do that back in the old days? Je ne sais pas. So, but the promise of or the idea of code splitting is load the minimal necessary code to teach your app to get everything up and running, and then so the user sees something immediately, and in the background hurry up everything else, and in the background hurry up everything else. So that's the premise of this. Great. The question is that how can we do that? So we need to find a plan. We need a strategy for split things out. So that's what it is, code splitting. And it says, well, uh, because now Vite, this dev server, this actually also is using on production with Parcel, because now Vite and React plays really well to make that happen. So if you're defining your, for example, here we look at how uh, React, the developer surface, plus the React DOM weighs something under 45 kilobytes, according to Bundlephobia. And how by uh, reaching 100 kilobytes, you need to do some code splitting. Again, I'm not enforcing that 100 kilobytes should be your metric, but you must have some sort of, or you should have some sort of code budget in your applications. So for something like you try to for something you want to get below, for something you want to stay under, or performance timing to or performance timing you're trying to hit. Okay, pretty much like competition. So if you're running or do any decathlon, you know, performing timings you're trying to hit or to stay under something. Uh, you always in this case you should be thinking what is the reasonably amount of time that my app will take to in from to load in front of the user. So things are starting to make a lot of sense here. Okay, next.
And it's going to differ by your app, your users, those kind of things. Like if you're writing code that calls, it's like Uber for helicopters. They probably have a nice phone. They're probably on a decent connection. You can probably have a pretty high performance budget. If you are writing some,
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It is the fur. It is the fur. It is different. Okay, it is different per apps. For example, if you have, if you are, if you are writing interest, if you are writing an app for Uber helicopter. Okay. That's to me something new and interesting. Uber helicopter. Uber copter. What the hell? Uber copter. God damn it. Uber copter, man. That's having better problems, man. I really love this kind of problems, man. Oh my god. Oh, holy hell. New York City. Oh, and say no. Ignore no. Oh my god. Helicopter. We're excited to announce the first step toward building the future of urban air mobility. Holy F. Oh my god. Future of urban air mobility and transforming urban aviation up Ubercopter is available for booking Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's deemed sorry, Ubercom Ubercopter, bro. Ubercopter, but I don't they I think they disqualify that. Ubercopter, bro. Uber chopper, Uber boat. Okay. Hmm. Jesus. But I think they discard this. It's like Ubercopter. Of course, their price must be quite elevated. It's like, it's not that. Again, for how long? Yeah, the distance. Ubercopter. But I think this is something that is reserved to, of course, to a few. But as long as you are efficient and effective, whatever, enjoy convenience and time efficiency with 8-minute flight for as low as 200. Okay, this is like airlines. Damn, son. Oh my god. Now they have this will be somewhat polemic, but hear me something. Bear with me. The way how this industry or defense industry works is when they get funds and they design something that are for the battlefield, okay, that actually was well battle tested in those scenarios and provide great outcomes, okay. Now then you're going to replicate that into consumer markets, okay, into civil applications. For example, this. Holy moly. Oh my god, the fucking hell. Jesus. I love it. I love it. Of course, there is some trade off with all of this decision. I love because the things that this allow us to, okay? That's one of the things that I love is the things that allow me to. That's the thing that I love about this. It's like that, my friend, is quite interesting. Ubercopter. I know it comes with a lot of problems because anytime you create a solution that solve a problem, it creates more problems, so that you need to create more solutions for each one of them, and so on and so forth. But I think that this is something, for example, when you want to save time, okay, and if you have the money and if you're someone that is competent, intelligent, and assertive, of course, this is the kind of thing that you want to, for example, move around the city. Holy moly, man. And especially in cities, oh, yes, especially in cities like New York. Holy moly, man. Anyway, Jesus. Okay. I mean, holy moly, man. Oh my God. Man. Uber Elevate and the future of aerial ride sharing, man. Aerial ride sharing. How do you say this in Spanish? Um, el ride sharing es el, el aeropilotaje compartido. No, el aéreo transporte compartido. Exactly. Aerial ride sharing. El aerotransporte compartido. Oh my God. Holy mo. Okay. That's when was this? When this was published? Published date? There is no published date. Who that are you? Blade? What is Blade? Fly the future today. Oh my God! It's because they're using it as only. Hold in. Solar eclipse flight. See the solar eclipse from the air. Holy moly! uh, the amount of radiation that you're going to receive is something that okay. Blade fly for the airport in 5 minutes. Fly between Manhattan and GF or Newark in 5 minutes. Again, oh my God! Oh shit! Oh man, I love it. Oh nigga, man, I love it. The thing that I love is the time that is uh, saving you. That's one of the things that I love it because, of course, it's like Newark or GFK. They're going to fly to this and there. Oh my God! Holy moly! Mother. Anyway, this is interesting. Oh, You were helicopter. You were copter.
Thing that keeps they probably have a nice phone that is those kind of things. Like if you're writing code that calls, it's like Uber for helicopter.
Oh my God! If you're if different per apps. For example, if you're writing an app, or if you're writing an app, so if you're writing a if you're writing if you're writing code, oh my God! If you're writing code that calls
There's
exactly, it is if you're writing code, for example, like Uber helicopter or Uber copter. No, I want to put it here. Uber copter, man. Uber copter has been discontinued. The following details provide pertain to how the Uber helicopter service may have previously operated. For immediate helicopter chapter request, consider booking with Blade. Ajá. Okay. Medi mobility or transportation to EVA, eVTOL, carbon neutral sustainability. Oh my God, they discontinued that. But holy hell, Uber helicopter discontinue, discontinue, discontinues, discount, discount, discontinue, discontinuous, okay, continuous. So is this continue us? Okay. So this continue discontinue us. Okay. Discontinuous or discontinued. This is that. This is continued. Discontinued. Okay. They probably have better cell phones.
They probably have a nice phone. They're probably on a beautiful.
They probably have a nice phone, a decent connection.
Connection. You can probably have a pretty high performance budget.
Exactly. You came pretty high. You can probably have you can probably have a high. You can probably have a pretty high budget.
If you are writing,
A pretty high performance budget. However, if you're writing an app for farming, if you are, you know, if you are writing, if you're writing something that keeps, okay, if you're writing something that keeps track of water, or okay, if you're writing something that keeps track of watering, of a farmer watering, or a farmer that's watering,
something that keeps track of, a farmer that's watering their crops,
watering their crops,
frequently out in the boonies, they have terrible 2G.
frequently out in the boonies, the boonies. Uh-huh. In the jungle, the boonies. Far away. Okay, that's farm. Farm there out is in the boonies. En el quinto piso. What is this motherfucker? Urban Dictionary. Urban Dictionary. That's one of the reasons why I pay for this kind of course. Is that it's not only the technical aspect, but also the this intangible asset, this the stick in the middle of nowhere. Boonies. Why boonies, bro? No, he lived something out there in the boonies, in the middle, in the middle of nowhere. Usually associated with living out in the country. Man, I live out in the boonies. Usually associated in the in some remote areas. Okay, boonies. American colloquially word for wilderness or place in the middle of nowhere, far from civilization. In the boonies. Why in the boonies, bro? A location so far that city limits that even animals question your presence. Uh, that even animal question your presence. Who the fuck are you? Okay. Uh, boonies. But why boonies? The boonies. An alternative term for the stoner. Okay, the boonies. The middle of nowhere. But why boonies? Why boonies? Or where boonies are coming from? Okay, where boonies were or etymology, man. Very straightforward. Etymology. Etymology with G. Etymology. Exactly. Boonies is a diminutive from boondocks itself, borrowed from Tagalog Boondock Mountain during the Philippine American War. Uh-huh. Oh my God. Jesus fucking Christ. Etymology here, Wiktionary. Exactly. Bunducks. What the hell? Bunducks. Bunducks. What the hell? Oh, oh, Oh my God, that was interesting. Oh my God. Okay, I'll bang her. Anyway, sorry. Here we go. Anyway, so um, yeah. Was Mark Hamill for real? Mark Hamill. Okay, okay. The Boondocks. What is Boondocks? Right now you don't see what I'm doing, but is this? I'm actually currently looking at Boondocks. This is something that he mentioned, right? Somewhere else in the boonies, somewhere else in the boonies, at the boonies, bro. Colloquially shortened from boondocks, remotely and wild place. By 1964, originally among U.S. troops in Vietnam War, oh man, in reference to the rural area of the country as opposed to Saigon. But the terms remote and wild place in 1910 from Tagalog boondock mountain, a word adopted by occupying American soldiers in the Philippines for remote and wild place. It was reinforced or readopted during the World War II. Hence also boondockers, shoes suited for raw terrain. Tagalog boondock mountain, Philippines. Holy moly, boondock mountain. Ah, it means mountain, but it is largely meaning as a wilderness bear the inclusion of global force of war and empire. Tagalog, Tagalog boondock, Tagalog boondock from the Philippines. Boonies, trends of boonies. Okay, this is very US specific, bro. Very US specific. Boonies, boondocks. Oh my god, the remotes in wild. From these Philippine words, Tagalog boondocks. Tagalog boondocks or montane from Philippines to describe something that is remote. To describe something that is remote. Holy moly. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Connection, but writing something that keeps track of, a farmer that's watering their crops.
Exactly. So for example, here this, if you're writing something that keeps track of farmers that are watering their crops, uh, frequently their crops, frequently out of the bunnies, frequently out of the bunnies, frequently out, frequently out, frequently out in the bunnies, out in the bunnies, in the wildness. Okay, and colloquialism, and have they have terrible connection. They have a terrible 2G connection.
Frequently out in the boonies, they have terrible 2G connection, whether that's in rural South Dakota.
Where okay, whether that is rural South Dakota, okay, whether that's rural South Dakota or India, or Australia, India, Australia, Australia, La Pampa in Argentina as well, some rural area, Amazonas, Amazonas, Amazonas in Brazil, some rural area, somewhere in the boonies, okay, uh, something in the boonies, okay, in the boonies.
or in India or Australia, right? They're going to have bad reception. So your performance budget is very sensitive.
So your performance, yeah. So your performance budget is very sensitive.
Things like this become very helpful.
Things like this becomes very helpful, and especially if you want to automate that, like I don't need to worry about doing the code splitting. Of course, I need to know how this is being done, uh, just like that. How is these things working? Okay, and then let someone else, in this case V, actually handles that for you.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start splitting things off of our main package.
What what we are going to do is to split split things out of our main package.
So let's go to app.jsx.
Okay.
And up here where we import React, right here, please import useState, lazy, and suspense with a capital S. Okay, I want you to delete details and search params, the imports here. We're going to split off our various different routes from our app so that it's only loading the route the user is loading. So I'm going to say const details equals lazy, and then you give it a function import dot slash details. Same thing for search params. So details equals lazy, and then a function that returns import details. And search params.
And as you can see here, this import is something that is widely available on Node, because you say, hey, I'm going to import again. Here you using is this EXX syntax model resolution instead of require. Okay. And we can use import because now Vid allows to do that. The current version that we're writing our applications allow this model imports. Move on.
Lazy import search params. If you are not familiar with import, this is a function that's built into JavaScript, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a built-in function. That's why we're not importing it or anything like that. And this works like require used to for CommonJS. These are static imports at the top, as in these are not dynamic. But import is dynamic import for ES6 modules, which is what require was for CommonJS.
Mm-hmm.
So this is saying if something tries to render details, panic and load details. Vite is smart enough to look at that and say, hey, this is not required on the initial page load. I'm not going to load it right away. Okay? And then now we end up with these details and these search params components, and these will not actually load until their route is actually loaded. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we need to tell it, okay, we're going to load this later, but what happens when we hit something that we need to load? We're going to do that with suspense. So inside your query client provider, put a component here called suspense. And that'll wrap everything inside of query client provider.
Query client provider.
And then we need to tell it what the fallback is. If something inside of this is loading, what do we do? Well, we're going to show just like a nice little loading pane. With a h2 class name equals, put whatever emoji you want in here. This is the loader. I have just a spiral here, but feel free to put whatever emoji you want to put in there. If you want to have a loading dog, that's actually, let's do that. That'll be cute. We'll put a dog. And then we'll have like a spinning dog head. So that's what suspense does. It basically says like, hey, if you hit this high up in the render tree and something is loading, show the fallback until the suspense has returned. And I need to restart my app. npm run dev. Notice when I load the page just for a very split second, it's all localhost, so everything's going really fast. But you probably even missed it because I missed it. Let's just put this for a second on fast 3G and refresh the page. You see the spinning dog for a second, and then it loads all those components in the back. So just to prove my point, if I go to my network tab and I look at all, so if I refresh the page, it can kind of be a little bit hard to make sense of this because of how Vite loads everything in dev. The way that Vite works is it actually uses the browser's built-in module loader for all of your locally served things. So that's why you see so much of this being loaded separately. But what you don't see here, this chunk business, this is all coming from React, right? So when you're loading this in production, it's loading chunks at a time, right? So what's really cool about this is now, if I load this, and I'm just going to close this, if I click on Luna here, it's going to load the details page, which has not been loaded yet, right? So I click on this, notice that it loaded this DOM chunk down here. Like all of this stuff only came afterwards, right? So we've now split out this particular piece of code. That is code splitting. And honestly, what's cool about React is that's it. It's all you need to know about splitting code in React. Right now we're splitting on route, which is kind of like the most brain dead way of doing it, right? There's just now like, okay, we're going to split based on route, but there's lots of other things you can code split on, right? I actually don't need the modal until someone actually clicks on the modal, right? So what do you do there? Let's just pop over and do it really quick. We're in details. Instead of loading modal, just delete that and say const modal equals lazy, which I'll load from React, function import dot slash modal, right? Now, if I click a doc Luna, it's going to flash for just a second on the loading, and then it'll show this, right? Again, we're going fast enough here. Let's just hard refresh the page here. You see the spinning dog head. If I click a doc Luna again, it's going to show that spinner, right? Because it's loading modal on.
Is loading modal on the fly.
Now, everything that I've shown you so far is a massive waste, right? We've objectively made our app slower because none of these bundles are very big. Like our modal bundle is going to be a kilobyte at best, right? So splitting off a kilobyte, not worth it, right? You want to be splitting off like 30 kilobytes, 50 kilobytes, 100 kilobytes, right? So let's pretend that the modal loaded like all of moment.js for some weird reason. Great, code split that. That makes a ton of sense. But just to split something for the sake of splitting it, you're better off just leaving it in your bundle. So it's not a silver bullet. Please make sure that you're measuring that you're actually making your user experience better rather than worse. You need to be splitting tens of kilobytes for code splitting to make sense. Does that make sense? So yeah, that's one of the points of caution with both this and server-side rendering. It's not necessarily always a better thing to do this. You need to make sure that you're measuring your app, how your users are responding, those kind of metrics for you to really know I'm actually making a positive difference in my user's life, because it's really kind of a shell game of performance. If I move something to make my initial paint faster, I'm making my time back interactivity worse, or like things like that. So
It's a
just make sure
trade-off.
you're keeping all that stuff in your mind.
There's a lot of trade-off.
So very contrived example, but you know it can be super useful. If you have a huge application, you have to do code splitting in order to get decent performance. Okay. Any questions about code splitting?
Where does the code rest when we put it lazy? Will it be downloaded immediately once that loads, or downloaded only when required?
So what happens here with like import? Right now, the way that we have this set up, modal will only be requested. Notice this is a function, right? Once this function is invoked, right? So lazy will only call this function once it's actually trying to be rendered, right? And then suspense will catch that, and suspense will allow that to be paused while we load modal in the background. A very valid next question to ask there is, can we get optimistic about it? Can we load stuff in the background? The answer is yes, we definitely can. We're now adding like another factor of complexity here by doing that. The best way that I found to do that is you have a service worker. If you're not familiar with service workers, basically what they do is you have your application, you have your API server. A service worker sits in the middle, so anytime that your application makes a request to your API, it goes through your service worker and out to the API, right? That's just how service workers work. What you can do is you can basically have your service worker, once it loads, once your app is loaded, you can say, okay, the user is trying to load modal, the user might try and load details, they might try and load this. So they basically go and grab all of the pieces in the background so that whenever modal gets requested to the service worker, it can just say, guess what, I already have it. We're not going to talk to the API right now. Here you go, right? And so by having that service worker sit in the middle of that, you can basically just like serve those requests as if they were happening instantaneously, and your user never has to know, and you don't have to write your code any differently either. The service worker can handle all of that. So the way that you do that is you have Vite or Parcel or Webpack generate a manifest of all the chunks. The service worker, once it's loaded and once your app is loaded, can look at that manifest and say, all right, go give me all of those chunks, and then it'll do that for you. Something like Remix actually does this for you already. It's actually one of the cool parts of Remix, that they kind of take care of that entire architecture for you if you do it correctly. But it is possible to do yourself as well. Hopefully you can see why I'm not teaching you that today. It's like another half hour that we'd be going over setting up service workers, and this is not a class on service workers. So, is there a class on service workers, Mark?
We actually have two. We have one on progressive web apps with Maximiliano Berman.
Okay, that'd be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Build progressive web app from scratch. Exploding service worker with Kyle Simpson. Oh,
Context.
okay. Okay. So, uh, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.